of the agenda. So, all right, then I will start with this meeting's discussion among commissioners and select presenters. The public is welcome. Items scheduled may be moved or discussed during a different portion of the meeting based on circumstances or availability of speakers. This meeting will be hybrid. The commission meeting will have a physical location in the City County Building in Cannon Room 335, and members of the public may provide public comment in person. Commissioners and presenters may join or participate either in person or through electronic means. Because we do not yet have a quorum, we are not going to call to order. So we're going to skip towards the end of our agenda. We'll do a roll call after we have quorum, where we'll approve the top minutes, and then we'll go into the two presentations that we have today that require a quorum. But for now, we are going to go to item number 6 and 7 on the agenda, which I believe will be handled by Mrs. Moana, and you want to take over?
All right. Okay, so I am going to share screen right now. And this is the document.
Oh, yeah, I do that.
What was that?
The annual report.
Oh, you want me to share it or you'll share?
Oh, I have it.
Okay, go ahead. So Michelle will be giving that report.
So, yes, we're going to have a presentation from the equity manager.
We're putting you out there, right, Michelle?
I know, I'm just like the document stuff, but I just have so many things right there. So this is the Salt Lake City Human Rights Commission 2022 annual report. This is still currently a draft, but we're gonna go through it. And if you have any updates, please feel free to let us know so we can take note of it as we go through it. So the basic title page will have a message from the chair and or vice chair. We have the list of commission members. And then we have the list of subcommittees and all the commissioners on each of the subcommittees. And this is where we'll need probably the most input from you all as commissioners, is the review of subcommittee 2022 goals and priorities. So for CDAW, the HRC will seek to adopt a city ordinance that protects women and girls from gender discrimination. This year, we were able to complete research and adopted the CDAW ordinance across the nation, assisted in drafting ordinance with the attorney's office, working with the mayor and city council to adopt and codify the CDAW/gender equity ordinance. What will be in process, and this will go along with our 2023 priorities as well, is building out the framework for the intersectional gender equity study.
I will add to that we also are going to have a standing subcommittee for the commission's responsibilities as outlined in the ordinance.
What was the last part of this you said?
Standing subcommittee.
I know, it was so good, and I was like.
Standing subcommittee to address the commission's ongoing responsibilities as outlined in the ordinance. Because I believe the Human Rights Commission has oversight.
Yes, it's a big part of it, along with the chief equity officer as well. Is there any additional notes from individuals on Zoom for the CDAW committee? So moving into homelessness, our goal was the HRC will seek to review and address homelessness policy and programs and provide recommendations. This year, we were able to inquire a plan for Ramada, a policy for mitigation, beds-based emergency shelters, recognize that one camp would be cleared and the process for moving, understanding the scope that Salt Lake City is trying to address, meeting with Andrew Johnston, county and state representatives, join the Salt Lake Valley Commission to End Homelessness, and researching best practices. I'm currently in process, this shouldn't be here. It's a good thing we review it. That was fun. Okay. Anything we need for homelessness subcommittee?
I would move to join the Salt Lake Valley Commission to End Homelessness from the completed to the in process.
Okay.
And perhaps researching best practices.
And then does the completed feel accurate to what the subcommittee has done this year?
I think that second one might need some clarity on that.
The researching best practices?
No, the second one on completed, I think that one can't be clear. That might have been a note on my behalf and not an actual
So maybe
statement.
recognizing the policy and processes of camp mitigation.
That, what Jason
That's-
said, Doctor.
That's all we need to know.
Wessel.
And then take off the rest of it, like this part?
Yeah.
Okay. Does this seem more accurate?
Then understanding the scope of. That's all the city is trying to do this.
That is so vague.
Yeah, I think that was the meeting we had was understanding the scope of. More of like how Salt Lake City is in the whole. Part of the whole process, because you learned about the state, the county, and Salt Lake City.
Understanding the role that Salt Lake City, something like that.
Yeah,
Understanding the role that Salt Lake City like plays or has.
plays in addressing homelessness. Oh, Nicole, Commissioner Salazar Hall is not connected.
Yay.
So, what happens?
You can proceed.
I'm here.
Or the vice chair of the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nicole, what we're doing is, because we're waiting for your technical issues to get resolved, we jumped into item 6 on the agenda. We're about a third of the way through it. Do you want to begin now, or do you want us to finish item 6, the presentation of the equity manager on the end of year draft?
Go ahead and finish.
Does anyone else have any more thoughts on the homelessness subcommittee? So moving into gentrification, the HRC will seek to review current study, policy, and programs and provide recommendations. So the completed has the thriving in place study, and then in process has the HRC review of the gentrification study in October, but I think that got.
Yeah, pushed to November, so they'll be here next month.
Was the Thriving in Place study that the initiative that Evis was behind?
Yes.
Or- So,
They renamed it to Thriving.
so remember, because the original like title was ridiculously unwieldy.
Yeah,
I think that probably covers it all, but you need to fill in more space. You could talk about partnering with the University of Utah. That was all part of that same process, but that, yeah, partner with the University of Utah, and that Thriving in Place was the private entity.
Okay,
I'm trying to think how the best way to word it was partnered with stakeholders to produce the Thriving in Place study.
and then other than that, is this pretty much it for gentrification?
yeah, we'll have in process what the next steps will be after we meet with them.
Perfect. So our last subcommittee for 2022 is Refugees and New Americans. The HRC will seek to review policy and programs and provide recommendations. So completed, reviewed language access policy and joint resolution and provided recommendations. And in process is the data of city programming that serves refugees and new Americans.
The completed to add that those both were passed after the HRC provided recommendations. So the mayor and city council.
So reviewed and passed.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking.
And Shauna is not participating, he could put in what's in process.
Yes.
yeah, and we can connect with them through email and by phone, we'll call them.
So let's leave space then for another bullet point for her to fill, because that was what the last meeting was on. Plans moving forward, and so.
Yes, and I know data was one of the biggest points. So going into annual highlights, here we just have the passage of CDAW, establish CREP and ADC members in ordinance, and the HRC webpage remodel, which will be done by the end of this month. This is another part where we will definitely need input is the recommendations and priorities for 2023. So for CDAW, the HRC will support the Chief Equity Officer and Equity Manager in implementing the intersectional gender equity analysis. And this will include internal data collection and community listening sessions. Is there anything to add there?
But that's not enough.
I know it's gonna be a lot. I'm already thinking ahead.
So just to know again, Nicole is having issues, so we'll proceed with this. She just lost audio again. We might have to do those two portions next month. I'm so sorry, Jason. She's gonna try again, but we'll continue forward with this part.
We can, if Esther is over in the city council meeting, we can ask her to come over for 15 minutes for his presentation.
Yeah, that could also
Because
be.
it can't happen until oh.
But I guess by the time you're finished, we'll see if she can reconnect. So sorry. Yeah.
Who's our chair is also the
Down the hall.
Glendale Community Council chair, so she's kind of doing double duty tonight.
Not a problem. And it's no language better, that's. Not a problem.
Okay, so
So homelessness. The HRC will seek to review and address homelessness policy and programs and provide recommendations such as continued participation in Salt Lake Valley Commission to end homelessness, request to be a part of the process when policy is being taken to legislature.
and I would back that off of being that specific, just leave it a request to be a part of the process when policy is being determined, discussed.
Okay,
Because specific to the legislature is just one facet of it.
And possible draft letters of support for policy and programming.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Gentrification, the HRC will seek to review current thriving in place study, policy and programs and provide recommendations. So I guess, is that question on the screen more so for the individuals
Yeah.
coming in November?
yeah, that's why we just left it there. We'll wait till November to hear what they say, whatever.
Yeah, because we haven't seen the final. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Everett, were you trying to say something?
No, that wasn't me. That was somebody else.
Oh,
Oh,
I think Nicole finally gained.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
Yes,
I
I
know why-
finally got back in. I can hear everybody. Okay, this is great. Okay, sorry
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
That was me.
I feel like.
I wanna make sure I'm listening to before on Zoom too. Okay, we're almost done here. And then as a reminder, the mayor's goals of 2022 was to finalize the thriving in place study and transmit relevant policy recommendations to the city council. And we hyperlink that there as well.
sounds good.
And then lastly, refugees and new Americans. The HRC will seek to review Salt Lake City programs that support refugees and new Americans and provide recommendations. Creating a procedure for consistency on gathering ethnic/racial demographic data, aligning with the federal census guidelines, we link that there. Reviewing subcommittee plan and making recommendations from this and the peer report. getting monthly updates from the language access coordinator, and also facilitating community listening sessions.
I would say with a caveat that we should get
Yes.
Luna and Shauna's feedback on, because they're going to be hitting this up, hopefully. They can insert any further goals that they have.
Yes.
Otherwise, it looks good to me.
And then lastly, we're gonna go into the 5-year priorities timeline, and we're not gonna discuss it in depth because we do have to kind of think this through, but at least for 2023, that I think that's the most important right now. To implement the intersectional gender equity analysis, facilitate the community listening sessions, identifying, reviewing, and assessing community programs / policies that serve refugees and new Americans, research best practices used in other cities, and follow up on the gentrification study.
I think the best practices used in other cities was for homelessness.
Okay,
Yeah, just putting that in there, so that hit every subcommittee.
just gonna add that there, so yes, the rest of the years are we planning to solidify this a little bit?
Yeah. We just want the input for now, and then we will put, this doesn't need to be to the mayor until December. I just want to make sure by next meeting, we'll send them the whole draft.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
so if no one else
Hey,
has.
This is Everett. So
Yeah.
I think I'm supposed to report to the HRC once a year on the ADC and what they're doing. I think that was part of the requirement for me to be on the HRC, if I remember right. Is that not
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Oh, yes, that is in the ordinance. I remember they just added that piece to it, because what Nicole's doing, or Commissioner Salazar will be doing.
is what
Is-
Commissioner Bacon.
Yeah.
We can drop in then on our annual goals, just the updates.
Okay.
The updates from the other boards and
ADC.
commissions.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the ADC, the racial equity and policing. I think those are the only two that are required by
Yeah.
ordinance to report to
To the
HRC.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that can be a standing one that drops in all of the annual stuff that receive annual report from
REP and
REP
ADC.
and ADC.
We'll put that.
Okay.
in.
Thank you for reminding us, Everett.
Thanks for reminding us
sure.
of it.
Sure.
We'll also add you to the next one's gonna be packed, but our last meeting of the year, we'll probably need you to have that report, because that's our last meeting for 2022. The December meeting will be the celebration for the Human Rights.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, so we'll add you to that, and we'll give you more information, and I'll talk with Ashley as well, so we are all on the same page. Everett.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yes. This is pretty much it. The appendix you all can review. I sent this document to all of the commissioners. So if you can just review it, and please let Moana and I know if you have any edits by next meeting at the latest, really.
Probably in the next 2 weeks before, so we can have and we'll send a follow-up email.
Yes, we'll send the follow-up.
And we'll just request it, probably give it 2 weeks, and then before the next meeting, we can do a final, and all we have to do is say yes or no in November.
So that was it. So we can go to.
All right, so we'll go back to the regular agenda now. I believe we have a quorum, so we'll call this meeting of the Human Rights Commission to order. This is our this is our October meeting, October 4th, regular standing meeting. We'll do a roll call. I am Vice Chair Jason Wessel, representing District 1, conducting the meeting today.
Olivia Jaramillo, District 3.
Michelle Mooney, Equity Liaison.
Mona Luabeafoka, Equity Manager.
Jason Oldroyd, Senior City Attorney, Salt Lake City.
Nicole Salazar,
Nicole?
District 5.
And Everett Bacon at large.
Okay, so that gives us 4 commissioners with 7 members currently serving. That gives us a quorum, so we're called to order. We have, next item on the agenda will be public comment. We don't have any members of the public in the room right now. Are there any members of the public online?
No.
Okay, so we have no public comments. That'll take us to, we need to approve and adopt the minutes. I skipped that. Did everybody have a chance to look at the September meeting minutes? I'll assume yes. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as presented to us.
Second.
So moved.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, the minutes have been adopted. Then that'll bring us to item 4 now. Jason, if you would like to take over finally, we'll get you out of here as fast as possible.
Sounds good, thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Oldroyd with the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office. I get the chance to speak with you today about the open meetings training that we do annually. I'm not sure how many of you have had the chance to do this before. If you have any questions at any point in the process, please feel free to raise them. I'd be happy to discuss them. If there's something that I need to take a look at some more research, I'm happy to do that as well. So what we're dealing with here is the Open and Public Meetings Act. It's Title 52, Chapter 4. And really what it is there's a public policy that the state legislature has declared that the cities, that business should be conducted in the open, and it should be transparent. So we take our actions openly, and we also make our deliberations and our discussions open as well, so that the public has a right to see just what we're doing. So we do have this annual training requirement, and that's what we're doing here today. The first thing we're going to talk about is just what constitutes a meeting. And a meeting is the convening of a public body with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session. It can be whether in person or also, particularly in today's world, by means of electronic communications. It's for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon matters over which the public body has jurisdiction or advisory power. So meetings are typically, such as what we're doing here, a relatively formal process. It doesn't include a chance gathering or a social gathering. So if you meet socially, you're not going to be conducting the meeting in those settings. I would just caution that you make sure that you don't use a chance or a social gathering to discuss matters over which you have jurisdiction in a way that may circumvent the process. So with regard to the quorum is a simple majority of the membership of the public body, unless it's otherwise defined in the city code. So what we're talking about is essentially meetings need to be open, or the vast majority of meetings need to be open and available to the public. That would include not just a meeting where we're sitting down, but also a workshop or an executive session, or even a traveling session of the commission, where you might be moving from place to place. It's also really the two primary things that we're trying to do are making sure that the information obtaining phase and also any final action or decisions are done in public and are available to the public through the meeting. In order to make sure that the public knows what we're doing, we need to make sure they have adequate notice. So the notice of a public meeting will include the agenda, the date, the time, and the place of the meeting. Now, the act itself requires 24 hours advance notice at a minimum of a meeting, unless we have an emergency meeting or those circumstances involved. So an agenda, really what we're trying to do with that is we're just trying to let the public know the substance of what's going to be discussed and acted upon. So we want to have sufficient specificity to notify the public about what's going to be considered. You may also find some circumstances when a member of the public raises something that's not on the agenda. In those instances, the chair or whoever's conducting the meeting has the ability to determine whether there can be discussion on that topic, but there can't be any decisions made with regard to that topic until it's been on a subsequent meeting agenda and it's had a chance to be noticed properly. So there is one exception to this particular limitation, and that's if we have an emergency meeting. If there is an emergency meeting, then we just try to give the best notice possible in those particular circumstances. With regard to the keeping a record of the meeting, we do that through minutes and recording. Both are typically kept. The written minutes are generally considered to be the official meeting or the official record of the meeting, and presently are kept indefinitely as we go forward. So within the minutes, we want to make sure that we have the date, time, and place of the meeting noted, the names of the members who are present and absent, the substance of all the matters proposed, discussed, or decided by the public body, a record of any members of the public who are not members of the commission who comment, and the substance of what they say. And then also, we've got one other thing. You as members of the commission have the ability to specifically request that a certain item or thing that's discussed is included in the minutes. So if there's something that you feel strongly about or you want to make sure makes it into the record, you can request that. A recording is generally kept. However, it's not required to be kept of an open meeting that's a site visit or a traveling tour, as long as no vote or action is taken by the public. Example of that, I work with the commission that oversees the building on occasion. Sometimes they'll go tour the grounds, take a look at the trees and the other things that are there. In those types of instances, we wouldn't necessarily keep a recording. We just make sure we didn't make any final decisions. I'm not sure if you have similar circumstances where you're traveling or mobile while you're having a meeting, but if you are in those circumstances, then you simply can't take any actions or votes.
So we haven't in years, but we did used to do public listening sessions, or they would
Okay.
convene a meeting out in the public to discuss a topic.
Okay.
But that would be a specially scheduled thing, so that would still be convening a meeting, correct?
I believe it would be if you had everyone together and you were receiving comments and input from the public. I think that would fall inside the meeting structure.
So we would still need to do minutes and a recording.
You would still need to do the minutes. You wouldn't necessarily need to do the recording as long as no action is taken. But if it's possible to do the recording, I think that's always the best approach.
Those are some of the priorities for next year, so that's good to keep in mind.
I would do what you could to facilitate the recording. It doesn't mean it's impossible to hold the meeting without it, but I think it makes for a better compliance if we do have the recording if possible. Then in addition to the open meetings, there are some circumstances where a closed meeting can be held. There are very specific circumstances that apply to that. Some of the items that may apply to this particular body would be the discussion of the character, professional competence, or mental or physical health of an individual, strategy sessions to discuss any imminent litigation that may be happening. We also can close meetings for strategy sessions about purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, discussion about the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems, and one other one that can come up on occasion is just to receive legal advice from your attorney. So if there's something that you need specific to the attorney's office, we can do that in a closed session. In order to hold a closed session, there are a few prerequisites that we need in place. There needs to be a quorum present. There needs to have been notice given that a closed meeting may be held. 2/3 of the members of the commission present need to vote in favor of closing the meeting. And then we would announce and enter into the minutes the reason for holding the closed meeting and the location where the closed meeting will be held. And then finally, the vote by name for or against each member of the public body with regard to closing the meeting. So if we meet those prerequisites, we can go ahead and hold the closed meetings. If we do that, it can be used for any of those topics that were addressed previously, but we can't hold a vote in the closed meeting other than a vote to exit the closed meeting. So any final votes and decisions would need to happen in the open meeting. And closed meetings, the record that needs to be kept in those circumstances is a little different. Rather than using the written minutes, we typically would keep just a recording of those meetings. So we'd have those available if need be. Electronic meetings are something that over the past few years have definitely highlighted the need for, and I think it significantly facilitates the ability of the city and its boards and commissions to conduct the public's business. So we appreciate the chance to do that. We have adopted the necessary resolutions, rules, or ordinances to hold a electronic meeting. And typically we would need the anchor location, which is what we have right here, that provides a physical place where the public can attend the meeting and participate in it. We can also, if the president or the chairperson of the public body determines that conducting the meeting at the anchor location could be detrimental to health or safety, we could go ahead and close the anchor location, provided that we have an alternate means whereby the public can participate in the meeting and view or watch it. So we do have those options if they're necessary.
So I got a quick question.
Yeah.
We've always conducted the meetings by Robert's Rules of Order. I think that's just standard for the city, as opposed to Jeffersonian, which is really convoluted, but has Robert's Rules adopted how to facilitate online meetings? I haven't seen anything on that
That's a
yet.
good question. Not that I'm aware of, but I haven't looked at it recently to see just how that would be handled or what we do.
Yeah, we've basically just been budgeting for the last 2 years, and I don't know if there's anything established. Because all these procedures like taking votes and stuff, we've been kind of using the rules for if somebody were to call in.
Mhm.
But because of the visual component of Zoom and WebEx and whatnot, it seems that the participation level could be a little bit higher than by phone. So anyway, just something to follow up on, if there's established rules under Robert's Rules or rules for how to conduct either hybrid or whatever. So,
Thanks for raising it. That's a good point. I do think that for the most part, everything I've seen is everyone's just muddling through right now.
Even the
Making the best
legislature
efforts.
has not adopted any special ruling or anything, so.
Still, it'll be interesting to see what happens this time around, if anything comes up with this
Yeah.
particular session, because it really is a whole new world that we're in. It's things have changed so much in the last little while. But thanks for raising that. I'll take a look, but I'm not aware of anything currently, but I haven't checked recently.
I mean, nobody's.
If I may, I just checked the Roberts Rules website. It looks like there are specific interpretations or an official interpretation of the Roberts Rules due to the pandemic. I didn't get a chance to look at them and what that interpretation involves, but it looks like it was addressed, at least as of June 2020.
Okay, thank you.
That's really good to
I
know.
appreciate that. And to do some studying up.
Yeah, I mean, it might just require everybody who's familiar with Robert's Rules to get a refresher course on how to incorporate it, because
Yeah.
we've all just kind of been muddling through, like you said. So
Has it been an issue?
it's more just that if somebody were to raise an issue,
Are you venting?
you
Are
can't,
making an
you can't
amendment?
point to the rules where, because somebody can file an objection or a point of order, because it's not written down anywhere. How are we conducting Robert's Rules if you don't have a specific rule that you can cite?
Yeah, I can see that being more important for like the city council. Definitely.
I still would like to know how to do it. Anyway, I'm sorry to get off to a tangent.
No, it's a good point. Thank you. So we're really getting pretty close to wrapping up. The last few things I wanted to talk about. One, disruption of meetings. Over the past probably 4 or 5 years, there've been a few instances in the state where there've been disruption of meetings to the point where it caused problems. The Open and Public Meetings Act does not prohibit the removal of a person if that person willfully disrupts the meeting to the point where it's difficult to conduct business. So that is an option if something were to occur, that removal of an individual is something that could take place. And I also just wanted to finish up quickly with the consequences of violating the Open and Public Meetings Law. So typically the remedy would be that an action that's taken in violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act is voidable. The lawsuit would need to be commenced within 90 days of the date of the action. So there's a relatively brief 3-month period in which that could happen. But if it were to happen and the courts were to determine that the action was improperly taken or the rules weren't followed, then that action could be voided. And we'd essentially need to tee something back up and do something to revisit that issue if we want and do it correctly if we pass that. There is also, just from a personal standpoint, if there's a commission member who knowingly and intentionally violates the Open and Public Meetings Act or encourages its violation, it's possible that they could be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. So we just, encourage you to avoid knowingly and intentionally violating the act or encouraging this violation. Other than that, that's all I have with respect to the open and public meetings law. If you have any further questions, I'm happy to take them, or if we're good for now, I appreciate the chance to meet with y'all. It's nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Jason. Sorry we kept you here so
No,
long.
not a problem at all.
We were trying to follow the rules.
Thanks. Have a wonderful night.
Yeah, you too.
To
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Salazar Hall, I think you're up.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to find the link. I'm sorry.
Do you want us to pull it up?
Could you please? That'd be great. Yes, sorry, we're selling our house and buying another house, and today was inspection, and so we've just been kind of relocating everywhere. Okay, this is the draft annual report for the Salt Lake City Racial Equity and Policing Commission. And I'm sorry, on top of it, everyone in my family is sick right now, so I look an absolute fright, which is why my video is off.
Thanks for
Yeah,
joining
thank
us.
Very good. Everyone has fevers and like feel dizzy and super sleepy, and it's not good. So I really don't want to have you guys get whatever it is this is.
Are you okay to do this, or do you want to push this to another time?
No, I'm good to do this. It's just caught me, yeah, just a little off guard, but it's okay. No worries. I can do this. So the draft annual report for the Salt Lake City Racial Equity and Policing Commission, as you know, we've been at this for about 2 years. And our commission currently consists of the following. I'm chair for this year. Tanya Hawkins is our vice chair. She'll take over as chair next year. And then we have several people who signed up for 1-year terms, some for 2-year terms. So many of these faces are going to be changing over the next year, but the current commission is as is listed. We're hoping to get more photos of people, but some are very young. I think everyone here is now an adult. I think Dati turned 18 and graduated from high school. So I think she's the only remaining minor who's no longer a minor. I think the rest, all the young ones were all at least in college when they joined. So we will see a lot of turnover. But the REPC, of course, was formed in 2020 in response to the murder of George Floyd. And what Salt Lake City could do to address racial equity within its department as far as its policies and its culture concerns. So we did a lot of work the very first year, and it is currently represented by 15 members who have strong ties to Salt Lake City, either by residing in Salt Lake City, working in Salt Lake City, or going to school in Salt Lake City, or a combination of all three. We also are comprised of a racially diverse group of people. Right now, we're a little light on the Latino, Latina, Latinx spectrum, but we are well represented all around by the different communities who are adversely affected by a culture of policing that is not in line with diversity and equity. There are 3 subcommittees currently in place. They were formed at the very beginning of the REPC because there was just too much to focus on for one large group. The 3 subcommittees are police training, policies and practices, and school safety. I am most familiar with the school safety one because that's the one that I'm on and I've been connected to for the past 2 years. But all 3 of them are informed by community input and by our own experiences. So August 2020, we were established. June 2021 was our phase 1 report, and that was published, which included our recommendations and the bases for recommendations. In September 2021, our commission was codified. In December 2021, our phase 1 report was fully published. And now we are going to be giving our annual report to the mayor and the city next month. And this is because we report to the Human Rights Commission, we're finalizing it with you through me. So our phase 2 is really, our phase 1 was a pretty big phase where we identified the issues that needed to be addressed. Our phase 2 has consisted of carrying out all of those recommendations, and some of them are very long-term 5 to 10-year kind of goals because they consist of a lot of data gathering, implementing some policies, new policies that were changed during our phase one work, creating databases, methods of gathering data, adding new positions. A lot of this is going to take a long time to implement. So our phase two is really, it's less implementation and more of getting our recommendations established and getting them off the ground so that in 5 to 10 years, they can be fully implemented. So our plan for phase two is we began our phase two in January. July, October was compiling this draft report, which I'm reporting to you now. The draft has been sent to everybody on the commission for review. And then in November, with your approval, we'll send it to the mayor's office and then publish it in December. So the completed tasks are kind of low hanging fruit. We're hiring a senior education advisor, which is Jennifer Newell. We hired a full-time recruiter for Salt Lake City PD, and I guess I'll go through what the purpose of each of these are so that you're all aware. The senior education advisor, Jennifer Newell, that position was created to address specifically the school to prison pipeline. As many of you know, the mayor's office has historically off and on had a senior education advisor. It changes quite a bit throughout various administrations. It disappeared with Mayor Mendenhall's administration. I know Weston Clark attempted to take it over, but in our work in phase one, we determined that it was too much work for one person to handle and determined that it needed to be its own separate position if we were going to make our goals work for the city and for the Salt Lake City Police Department. So Jennifer Newell was, we recommended that a senior education advisor be implemented and hired to work with Salt Lake City PD, the mayor's office, and with Salt Lake City School District to renegotiate the memorandum of understanding regarding school resource officers or SROs. The memorandum of understanding, or the MOU, was scheduled to expire during the time that we were working on all of these goals for the Racial Equity and Policing Commission, and felt it best that the mayor had a point person to negotiate with the school district and with the police department. We felt that this was the only way that we would be able to have some of our recommendations come into fruition in the MOU itself. And so far, we knew it was going to be a lengthy process. I know some on our commission were hoping it would be a quick 6-month process, but it is proving to be a very, very long process. And I would prefer, and I think some of the members of our commission would agree, that we prefer that the MOU be more comprehensive and not rushed through, so that we can ensure that our children's needs and that our students' needs and the law enforcement's needs are met. We want to make sure that these children aren't being overly policed. We want to make sure that that any interactions with law enforcement are positive. And frankly, we're not entirely sure if SROs are a good idea, bad idea, or neutral. And so part of this senior education advisor is to ensure that, to find out if the interactions are positive, negative, or have no effect at all on these kiddos. So again, this is one of those 5 to 10 year goals that we really don't know what the effect of SROs are on our kiddos, but we wanted to start getting some baseline data from everybody. And unfortunately, no one has complete sets of data, and they're all kind of everywhere. And we needed to have one specific method of gathering that data and compiling it before we'll be able to know whether the MOU really needs to be changed in a massive way, if SROs should be completely eliminated, or if they need to be changed in any way. So it's a tall order for Ms. Newell to handle, but we felt that she was up to the task. I was part of the committee that helped, that recommended 3 candidates to be hired for this position. Jennifer Newell was at the top of the list of all of our recommendations, and we were very pleased to see that she was hired. The full-time recruiter for Salt Lake City PD, this was a recommendation that came out of the policies and practices. Is that policies and practices? I think it came out of both training and policies and practices subcommittee. We realized that Salt Lake City PD did not have enough representation within the agency to continue to recruit people of color and people from diverse backgrounds, and to ensure that the culture was such that everyone in Salt Lake City felt safe contacting law enforcement and interacting with law enforcement. So the full-time recruiter was to be someone who would focus specifically on recruiting people that would contribute to the culture that the Rep C wanted to see and what the mayor wanted to see, which was an inclusive and diverse type of culture. The mayor really took that into hand, and we've now hired a full-time recruiter. I thought I heard some rumor that maybe they, and this, I may be speaking out of turn, or my news may be old on this, but I thought there may have been an issue with her, maybe not. But there was one hired full-time, and I believe she's been given a budget and a team to help recruit for the Salt Lake City Police Department. The other completed task is we hired a community outreach officer to focus specifically on positive interactions with the community. Again, this goes towards our goal of making sure that everybody in Salt Lake City feels comfortable interacting with Salt Lake City Police Department. And we want to make sure that the officers are also on board with this and fully engaged with interacting in our community in a very positive, culturally specific sort of way. Part of our community outreach and the recruiter are to ensure that all officers are trained in the local history of Salt Lake City and the neighborhoods they're going to be working with. And we want to make sure that they realize that when they're walking into a specific community, that certain gestures, certain interactions are not indicative of criminal activity, but are indicative of a neighborhood's cultural interaction with law enforcement, and perhaps some trepidation in dealing with law enforcement, or even cultural issues of dealing with law enforcement. Like, for example, in many Islander communities, it is customary to not look somebody in the eye if they're a person of authority. Some law enforcement who are not familiar with that culture may take that as a sign of disrespect and suspicious activity, when in reality, that person is just showing respect for the authority. So it's that kind of training that we want to make sure is in place so that people of color are not misunderstood, that their actions and their culture are not mistaken for criminal activity and then thus overly policed. We also recommend, go back really quick, Moana, sorry, or Michelle, whoever's running it. We updated the Rep C page and links, or it's going to be updated. And we recommended Salt Lake City community-based trainers of color, which would assist with informing new recruits and current law enforcement officers and lateral officers of what those cultures include. And like I said before, with the training, is that we need to make sure that these officers are fully aware of Salt Lake City's history and what these neighborhoods have been through with law enforcement. Next slide. And please jump in with any questions. I'm open for any questions you guys have. The in progress things that we're going through, of course, supporting the senior education advisor and renegotiating and solidifying the MOU. I've been working with Ms. Newell on that issue. We haven't had a meeting in some time, but there are a lot of things a lot of moving parts, a lot of people at the table, a lot of cooks in the kitchen at this point. So it's going to be, the Rep C is just a small piece of this puzzle, and we're doing whatever we can to make sure that the MOU reflects the goals and values that the Rep C wants to see in that MOU. We're also building a relationship with the 911 dispatch director, because what we discovered in our initial work is that dispatch has a lot of, I don't want to say control, but they can really frame how a call goes through to law enforcement officers, whether it's a mental health call, or if it's a true to life crisis, if there are weapons involved. The way that the dispatcher frames a call to law enforcement really does have a large effect on how the officers approach a situation. So we want to make sure that the dispatchers are as culturally informed as the officers who are responding to that situation. And not just culturally informed, but also informed of mental health issues, because we did find that a lot of these incidents that involve people of color are related to mental health issues. We are disproportionately affected by mental health issues and law enforcement calls and interactions. And we want to make sure that the dispatcher script is matching what the officers are receiving in training. Because if they walk into a mental health situation believing it's just a standard domestic violence situation, it could result in a very negative interaction, and one that involves unnecessary harm to a citizen. And that's not what we want. We're also partnering with the Utah Administrative Office of the Courts Fairness and Accountability Group to improve data collection analysis. That was another issue that we found was very lacking, is that the data that we have about adults and children interacting with our courts is very limited. And part of the problem with that is that the way that the courts districts are divided is it's not specific to Salt Lake City. The districts are broken up into 1 through 8. The district that Salt Lake City is in is District 3, but it includes Tooele County, Salt Lake County as a whole, and Summit County as a whole. So it makes it difficult to parse out data of whether children of color in Salt Lake City are overrepresented in the juvenile court system, and whether adults of color in Salt Lake City are overrepresented in Utah courts. So we are working with them, and they have a great group of people they've presented to this group. And I'm really confident that we'll be able to hopefully parse out data in the future so we know whether Salt Lake City people of color, children of color are overrepresented in these arenas, and if it's because of law enforcement or if there's some other explanation for it. Next phase, or next slide. Oh my goodness, sorry guys. Annually, what we want to do for 2023 is make sure we do have an in-person retreat with the commissioners. We've had meetings in person. Our commission started off completely
Very
virtual.
small.
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry, it's pretty small type, so we're having a hard time reading it.
So Jason, we're just expecting you to have very super keen Superman vision so you can see everything. And if you can't see it, then that is a Jason problem. Totally joking. Yeah, it's pretty small. We got a lot packed in. We want to do all the things here, people. But we do want to make sure we have in-person retreats with the commissioners, because when we were able to meet, and it was very rarely that we were able to meet in person, it was a very positive interaction. So we want to make sure we do have that retreat with the commissioners on an annual basis. The other things we wanted to do is we had a lot of good feedback from our virtual town halls and our focus group meetings. So we do want to make sure those continue on an annual basis, possibly twice a year, but at least on a yearly basis, because we received a lot of really good feedback from those meetings. Salt Lake City PD also hosts community-based meetings, and want to make sure that commissioners are working with those groups and interacting with those groups and being able to hear some of the feedback that we're hearing from the community. And want to make sure that the lines of communication are open between us and the community and community organizations and events. The other thing we want to do is make sure that we want to partner with the Accessibility and Disability Commission, because again, as we noticed, we are overrepresented in the number of mental health calls and disability calls that go out to law enforcement, and they tend not to be good calls. They end up having negative outcomes. And so we want to make sure that those neurodiverse groups who are people of color who also have disabilities, are represented and treated as humans, and not just assumed to be committing a criminal act when really someone has autism and is sensitive to the lights that law enforcement is shining in their eyes. We want to be able to have updates with Chief Brown at least 3 times a year, including a review of law enforcement's budget every year, January through March. Make sure that our recruitment, training, and community relationships are improving, and any other updates that we have not been able to address. And of course, we'll discover those through our focus groups, our meetings, and those open lines of communication. Next slide.
Give me 1 second, Nicole.
No problem. We'll blame Jason for that delay. It's okay. Love you, Jason.
I'll take full responsibility for that one.
I know.
That's fine.
Okay.
One of our other goals include continuing to make recommendations to the mayor and the city council on how law enforcement is engaging with the community, with advocacy groups and other community members on policies and practices and public safety issues. We want to complete that renegotiation of the MOU for the SRO program, and that's going to be a tall order. I'm expecting next year is when it'll be finished. Just because of some of the stuff that's happening in the Salt Lake City School District and the number of people that are involved, it's not an easy process. Imagine trying to bake a 3-tier cake with 15 people in the room. It's going to be hilarity, a lot of misses, a lot of mess, and sometime after a very long time, you'll finally get the finished product, but it's going to take a while. We want to make sure that we develop a training based on the history of policing, because the history of policing is very, very racist. We want to make sure that law enforcement officers are fully aware of the racist and classist roots of policing. If any of you have not yet read End of Policing, I would highly recommend it. It does give, even if you disagree with the ultimate conclusions that the author makes, the history that's provided in the book is very telling, and he cites to a lot of firsthand sources and primary sources throughout history in the United States, detailing really how racist and classist policing started. So I want to make sure that law enforcement is aware of those roots, so that, if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. We don't want to repeat history. We want to make sure that Salt Lake City is reflective of its community and is equitable in its enforcement of laws. Again, the community-based trainers of color, providers and facilitators will help with that and make sure that law enforcement, that any new officer, lateral officer, and current officer are aware of that history and will receive that history of Salt Lake City in addition to the larger history of policing. We do want to review the current structure of the Civilian Review Board and look at national models to see where maybe we're coming short. I know historically there have been issues with the Civilian Review Board having consistent membership and consistent attendance to review police incidents, and want to make sure that this is a really vital part of Salt Lake City policing and community engagement. We want to make sure that it's running as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Real quick, my
Yes.
understanding, isn't the Civilian Review Board kind of limited in its structure based on state law that got passed a couple of years ago?
Yeah, there is some of that. And unfortunately, yes, that is going to play into it some. Even our new legislation isn't as restrictive as other states, though. There are some other states that don't allow any sort of civilian oversight of law enforcement activities. So even with that new statute that went into place, we're still pretty progressive. I mean, I wish there hadn't been that kind of limit, but part of what we want to do is help the city lobby the state to maybe relax it a bit in the future. That statute was more of a knee-jerk response to everything that was happening, and I think a few people's fears of different agencies being defunded in Salt Lake City and other parts of the state. I think if those legislators had actually spoken with the mayor, that may have allayed their fears, but I think a few people got very scared and lobbied hard to have that bill put in place. And I'm hopeful that when everybody sees that, no, that you don't make legislation based off of a knee-jerk reaction, that maybe it will be amended and will allow our Civilian Review Board to actually, and any other Civilian Review Board in the state to actually be effective. Because I think what they were afraid of, it's not at all what our Civilian Review Board was even doing and how they were even structured. So it was a little frustrating to see that happen, but I think it was mostly based out of fear, which I understand. That happens. I mean, the Rep C was created out of a level of fear as well. Luckily, we were a very level-minded sort of bunch and wanted to make sure that we were fully informed before we made any sort of recommendations that was going to change the face of policing in Salt Lake City. So we're hoping to work on that as well in the future. Maybe not necessarily lobby, but at least have some frank discussions with legislators to see if we can have those loosened a bit. But before we do that, we need to see what other civilian review boards are doing across the nation to see if we can do it a better way. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Wessel?
Yes, I recall when the law got passed, it was basically kind of solidifying the way that the civilian review board is structured. There's no way now to change it in city code or by ordinance. So until the legislature moves on that, I think we're kind of stuck with the civilian review board as is, but you probably know far more about it than I do. I just wanted to know what can be done about the current structure. I think you
Yeah, the
answered that
current-
fine.
Yeah, the current structure we can't change, but we may be able to propose something better to the state legislature. And again, yeah, we're limited by what we can do. If the state legislature limits what we can do in ordinance, then we're limited. But the hope is a little further down the road, we could propose something to a friendly or a few friendlies in the legislature to change it, especially now since we're 2 years on, things have calmed down a bit. George Floyd's death was deemed a murder. The murderers have been convicted, or at least one of them has been convicted. And so it's less about defunding police now and more about making it better. And I know, as you all remember, it was kind of a scary time. We were all kind of running around with our heads cut off like chickens, and it's fine. Everything will be okay. We just needed to have tempers calm down a bit, emotions come down a bit. We're no longer in that pandemic kind of frenzy, and we're hopeful that once we review how the structure currently is and maybe see what better ways it can be structured and move forward, we can actually propose that to the state legislature. Whether we're going to be effective in doing that, I have no idea, but we're going to try. We'll definitely try. Let's see. We want to evaluate current recruitment efforts, and I know we've been evaluating recruitment efforts. Like the video that's used for recruiting new officers is going to be redone because it was not great. It was a little more militarized, and we wanted to take the militarization out of police in Salt Lake City and make them a service, because that's what they are. They're to protect and serve everybody in Salt Lake City, residents, guests, everybody. We wanted to develop a hiring committee who could at least sit in on some of the hiring of Salt Lake City police. Chief Brown's been very open to members of the REPC sitting in on hiring and giving feedback on new recruits and lateral recruits. We also wanted to create a neurodiversity sensory needs subcommittee to specifically address the needs of the neurodiverse community, who are also people of color. It's one of those overlapping sort of groups that are very adversely affected by negative policing. We're hoping to make sure that they're represented as well, not just able-bodied neurotypical people. We also want to do the review the implied bias survey, and this was a little this got confusing and perhaps a little lost in translation, but what the original recommendation is that the agency itself, the officers who are currently employed by Salt Lake City Police, be surveyed about their experiences with bias within the agency. Part of that is to root out the racism that exists in Salt Lake City Police Department. And we're not saying that Salt Lake City Police Department is racist per se. It's just that there is a spectrum of racism, and people of color experience that spectrum very differently than white people. So we wanted to see how the people of color really felt about racism in the police department, whether they've experienced racism from other officers, from higher ups, people in administration, what white officers have observed. Because sometimes white officers will only talk behind closed doors and be racist behind closed doors, but never show it to anybody else, including the officers they work with. So we figured an anonymous bias survey would be helpful in determining what the internal culture of the Salt Lake City Police Department looked like. There is one done, I want to say out of New Jersey, and I can't remember, the actual article is in our REPC Google Drive, but it was pretty scary seeing what the survey produced from an interagency standpoint. And it was a very diverse police department that was surveyed, and the amount of racism that officers of color experienced and the amount of racism that was discussed between white officers was very, very concerning. So we wanted to conduct the same sort of survey within the Salt Lake City Police Department and make that an ongoing sort of survey to make sure that the culture within Salt Lake City Police was one of equity and not of racism. And I believe we're talking to someone from the U of U on that one.
This is probably outside the scope of the Racial Equity and Policing Commission, but while that was being undertaken, it would be great to see if it could be done in conjunction with a gender equivalent, the bias, gender bias study as well.
Yeah, we probably could do that. Yeah, that would be outside of the Rep C's purview, but definitely within the HRC's purview, and you could probably put the two together.
That's
Maybe we
more
can-
eloquent way of saying what I was just thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And it would help with the survey fatigue that I think many people come to experience.
And my impression, I don't know the numbers, but I feel it's probably true. It seems that there are probably more women than there are people of color in the current Salt Lake City Police Department.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
I think that's it, Nicole.
Those are the
Sweet.
main
Any
things.
questions?
Not questions so much, because I'm not really sure, this is the first time we've done this as being the supervising body for it, so I would say two things that I would like you to take back to the Racial Equity and Policing Commission is really, I would like to see more emphasis on your role in pushing for the integration of social work and the mental health angles. That seems to be the things that are of most pressing concern, getting those in. Words are failing me right now. But you understand what I'm saying, is that you've laid out a few different things that you guys are focusing on in phase 2. I would like to just emphasize from the Human Rights Commission how important those are. The neurodiversity, the mental health crises, and integrating the social workers more fully into the comprehensive response through 911 dispatch, through just training and making sure that those resources are more fully integrated with the Salt Lake Police Department. And then the second one was a problem that we've seen that came up just over this last summer, where we've had 2 instances of police responding to a call and a person dying, and there being a long delay of years before that is made public. So maybe an evaluation of the policies and procedures that relate to that if it's not a officer-related death, but the person still dies, that there needs to be some kind of reporting and follow-up on that. If you know what I'm talking about, the gentleman in the elevator who was stabbed and bled out, and the homeless woman at the refinery.
Right.
It seems that those two might be, it seems like that might be a blank spot in the policies and procedures that Salt Lake Police Department has, is if a person dies while the police are responding to them, if it's not officer related, then it doesn't go through that same procedures as like an officer related shooting or use of force.
Right, and I'll double check the policy handbook on that one because I believe those were amended in 2020. And I don't recall if the language was specific to use of force or if it was any death. I want to say it was any death, but I could be wrong. So I'll double check that one. And I agree that should absolutely be in place. Regarding the mental health thing, what has occurred is the law enforcement has created CIT teams which focus specifically on mental health. So a social worker goes out with a law enforcement officer to a mental health call, which also ties into our training with dispatch and properly identifying a mental health crisis versus an actual crime. And this is going to be in conjunction with what, oh goodness, is it Representative Tusher out of West Valley, who's trying to completely revamp how dispatch handles, like statewide dispatch handles mental health calls, and creating a separate mental health crisis hotline that would patch through VEC, patch through dispatch throughout the state, and would be able to be identified from the very beginning as a mental health crisis, not as a report of a crime. And then that would trigger any agency throughout the state to invoke their CIT teams if they have them. And this really more pertains to Salt Lake County, Utah County, Weber County, and Davis County, because we're the only counties that have agencies who have social workers on hand to go out with with law enforcement officers. We already have a whole team of social workers and who are able to go out on calls, but we don't have them for 24 hours a day. And our goal is to make sure that there were social workers on hand 24 hours a day to go out with officers for mental health calls. Because as we all know, mental health emergencies don't always happen 9 to 5. They happen at many different times of the day, many times at night. And we want to make sure that those people who are having those crises are getting the help they need, even if it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday. One of our recommendations did involve each and every officer being CIT certified. If laterals come in and are not certified, they need to become certified, right? When we were first doing our work, I believe it was optional. We wanted to make it mandatory for every single officer to be trained in mental health issues so that every single officer who's going out on a call is at least informed. But ideally, if there is a mental health call, that officer will be certified and there will be a social worker on hand with them to help de-escalate a situation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the instance of the autistic boy
Right.
that was shot, that was one where the officers themselves were well aware that they were not qualified to handle the call, but
Right.
they didn't have anybody to escalate it to. So anyway, we don't need to have the whole explanation. I just wanted to, because I'm not sure how we do this as Human Rights Commission with the oversight authority kind of thing. I just wanted to kind of give it our kind of emphasis that that's the direction we like to see a lot more, or I would like to see a lot more effort put into by Salt Lake Police Department, and with all of us on the same page, I think pushing in the same direction, growing in the same direction. That's kind of one of the priorities as I see it. So I don't know.
This is
Oh, go ahead, Everett.
So one of the things too that you might add in with the part on neurodiversity is epilepsy training. Many individuals who are having an epileptic seizure, an epileptic attack, it's not necessarily recognized correctly in many police cases. And something we did with the fire department a few years ago, before we were a commission, we actually were able to provide like a disability training for new fire recruits, and we've really tried to do this with the Salt Lake Police Department, but we haven't had any success. And because there is, I guess, a huge turnover rate for the Salt Lake Police Department, they haven't been able to schedule any kind of disability training for new recruits. So that was something I just wanted to bring to your attention.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The other one that we discussed was someone having a diabetic crisis. It can very much look like that person is drunk or under the influence of some substance, when really they need their medication and they need to get to a hospital immediately for treatment. So I absolutely agree with you with the epilepsy issues. That was the shining a light in somebody's eyes. There was we received feedback from someone who had epilepsy and had interaction with law enforcement who had light shining in their eyes, and it was triggering their epilepsy, which is very problematic. We want to make sure that all law enforcement is fully aware of these different issues and approaches each person, not assuming that person is a neurotypical person of average health in class. We want to make sure that we're approaching every person assuming that maybe they might have an issue that we're not fully aware of, and to be more inclusive of that. And unfortunately, people of color end up being more often than not the short end of that stick. So we do want to make sure that that's involved, but we are focused primarily on racial ethnic people.
This is Moana. Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
This is Moana. I'm wondering if this could be something that, just adding to Commissioner Bacon's point earlier in the meeting of making sure the ADC and REP report regularly to the Human Rights Commission. It's part of the ordinance, but specifically for that subcommittee that will be developed between ADC and REP, that maybe quarterly or biannually, they bring in what's happening with that subcommittee to the HRC. It could be something that we can keep you all in the loop.
I think that'd be helpful. Yeah, I think that'd be
So-
incredibly helpful to make sure that everybody is working together rather than trying to reinvent the wheel with with each of our recommendations.
So Commissioner Hermio, do you have anything you want to?
I do, actually. So thank you so much for that. That was a lot of great information. I am curious to, we're talking about training up our police force. What are we doing to take care of the actual police? Because we're tasking them to do so many things and be trained up on so many, on a wide array of things. What is being done to take care of the actual human being behind the badge?
Yep, and that is a great question, and it's one that I have been personally bugging Chief Brown about, because I do feel like we are not going to have effective police officers unless their mental health is also taken care of, and secondary trauma is very real and is very, very detrimental to everybody involved. Currently, they do have a full-time team of psychologists, social workers on hand to help the law enforcement officers who are responding to these horrible situations, having secondary trauma, PTSD. There aren't enough of them yet. So one of the problems is we don't have enough therapists, and this is a nationwide problem, not having enough therapists to meet the needs of everybody. So we're running into that roadblock, which is not really the Salt Lake City Police Department's problem, but it is something that we're constantly working on. And I keep bugging Chief Brown about just through text messages like, hey, how many social workers have you hired yet for these officers? They need it. What are you doing? What are you doing? Part of it's funding, but I think the Racial Equity and Policing Commission is ready and willing to recommend to the mayor to increase the Salt Lake City Police Department's budget to allow for those social workers and psychologists to be able to be hired and on hand 24 hours a day for the officers when they're needed. The other big problem we're running into, though, is the culture of policing in general has not been receptive to therapy or seeking help in the past and even currently. So we're running into that cultural problem of making it acceptable to seek out the help of a therapist after you've seen a horrible situation. That's going to take a lot more time, and it's going to take more than what we're able to do to make that change. I know there's a lot we can do with messaging, and that's what we're hoping the team that's currently in place can help do, and to really make it part of the law enforcement culture of you just saw something awful, go see Dr. So-and-so or go see Mr. So-and-so, they'll help you process it. But that's going to take a lot. That's one of our more 5 to 10 year goals. Most of what I've presented to you tonight for our ongoing goals are the 5 to 10 year ones, where it's going to take a lot to change the entire culture of a police department. And part of that is also seeking help when you've seen something terrible. But absolutely, that is something we very strongly believe in.
Yeah, thank you so much for that information. And it's, I'm retired Air Force, and there is a culture of not seeking help even after seeing something terrible. But also at the same time, within the military, we are at a high for suicidal ideation and suicides in general. So I was just wondering, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I agree. It's needed. And I'm a lawyer. We have one of the highest rates of alcoholism and substance use also for the same reason. So we don't seek out help when we need it. And we're not seeing horrible things. We're just dealing with horrible people. So it makes it hard.
Yeah.
I should say good
add-
people in horrible situations. Sometimes horrible people.
I'll add to that the major problems with alcoholism and domestic violence, higher proportion among law enforcement than the general public. So
Yeah.
those are angles that rather than the macho, I can deal with what I've seen at work. One angle might be well, you're taking it home with you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely agree with that.
And tell the commission that we're looking forward to their Latinx, Hispanic selection for their commission.
Oh man, trying hard.
Yeah. If you have
That's all
any
right.
recommendations too from this commission,
Okay.
we can put
Yes.
them on there.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't think I saw one person.
So
One person.
Any more thoughts or comments about the excellent report we just received?
That was great.
And feel free
Okay.
to email me with any questions you guys have, or if you see something you think would be a good idea. We are seriously always open to like all the questions, all the suggestions. It's one of the things that we really took very seriously in phase 1 and phase 2 is bringing in community recommendations and suggestions.
All right, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion that the Human Rights Commission support the recommendations as presented to us by Commissioner Salazar Hall from the Racial Equity and Policing Commission.
So moved.
All right, moved by Everett Bacon and seconded by Olivia Romeo. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Hold on, sorry, I screwed that up. Does anybody want to speak for this? Or does anybody want to speak against this motion? Okay, seeing that nobody wants to speak against this motion, we won't recognize anybody speaking for the motion. So now we can go into voting procedures. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's going to make a note that that passed unanimously. So the Human Rights Commission has just voted that we are going to support their recommendations as presented to us. That takes us now to the last item. What is that? The item 7 on our agenda, the Human Rights Day celebration, which we will hand over to Moana.
All right, and I will go quickly because of time. So the biggest thing right now that I will be sending out an email after this is we have SLC TV, so we can create our 2-minute segment of introducing the commissioners for Human Rights Day. And we just want to make this so that it can introduce Human Rights Day, the commissioners, because hopefully by December 10th, we'll have a full commission. One person is being going through advice and consent in city council tonight. And so when that person for District 6, if they are approved, then we'll have District 6 and only District 4 will be vacant. So I've been reaching out, if you all could sign up for times on Monday, October 17th from 10 to 2. I'm saying this to you verbally, but I've sent a follow-up email. And Tuesday from 12 to 3, probably 30-minute increments. We're just asking you all to come to the SLC TV Plaza 349 to record a short message. And then SLC TV will put it together. We'll show it for the first time at the Human Rights Day celebration, and then it will be on our website. And if you can't meet on these 2 days in these time slots, let's work it out through email. I'll send the link of what we've done in years past, and it's really nice. And I would like the Human Rights Commission to have a face instead of online, just a list of the name of your all names. And then they will be also taking your headshot there, so we have a consistent headshot for everyone. Jason's smiling. For you also come camera ready and for a photo that we'll have.
What day is this?
If you are available on Monday, October 17th and Tuesday, October 18th. Would you be, you're not, then let's get together and I can schedule you a time that you're available.
Thank you.
If we can just get a bulk of people, that would be nice, but if not,
I'll be in California that week, so I'm gonna.
I'll be at a conference in Nevada.
Okay, I'll try to get you two on Monday then.
Thank you.
I'll send the times, and if those absolutely don't work, then we'll send out another grouping with SSCTV.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's the biggest piece. We already have, of course, the Sorensen Community Center, and then Spice Kitchen will be our caterer. And please, everyone, can you share out or fill out the nomination form? Because we want to close it by October 31st. So in our November meeting, we can quickly
You sent
share
us the
out.
link, right?
Yeah,
I think I saw it.
so even if you have a few people who want to make it as diverse as possible for the organizations that are being nominated, we've gotten a couple from community members. So if the commission themselves, everybody nominates at least one person or an organization, preferably community-based, and those that don't always get a light shined on them. That's what historically we've had in the past. And Michelle, we tracked down the last 4 years, so we'll share that out as well in another email, so that you'll know not to nominate a certain person. Or,
So just a heads up, I am intending on nominating the Nomad Alliance for their outreach with quality of life issues for people experiencing homelessness. So if anybody has any experience with them or any giant red flags about the organization, let me know before I nominate them. Anyway, that's just, I wanted to throw that out there for everybody to give their opinion on if you know anything about the organization.
all right, that's all I have, Jason.
Right. Then what do we have? Review goals and priorities for our subcommittees. Let's see, I don't think we've got representatives from, for gentrification or refugees and new Americans. For homelessness, again, I'm just dealing with the Salt Lake Valley Commission to End Homelessness. Got more meetings to keep coming up. As you've seen, if you followed the news in the last month, there's been a lot of spinning wheels and budget coming in from different directions, from state level, the federal funding coming in from COVID relief. And then I think the city put forward another $6 million. So there's a lot of spinning plates going on right now as everything is coming through the pipeline. The big thing is that they're planning ahead for the winter overflow emergency shelter. It's going to be in Mill Creek, not in Salt Lake City. So that's a big change.
Oh, yeah.
The meeting going on right now over in the city council is probably very contentious because they're dealing with the, I believe, the lease for the tiny homes community that's being overseen by
Others.
the other side, TOSA, the other side academy. So that's a bit of contention because I don't believe that they have buy-in yet from Glendale and Poplar Grove. They feel that they're taking too much of a burden of the burdens being placed on the west side and giving 40 acres of real estate in the middle of Glendale to the other side academy that has no track record on this issue or experience with the providing these resources is bothers them. So I have no idea what's going on in that meeting right now, but it's probably pretty contentious. Then the city is also presenting the affordable housing overlay, which has been another major contentious issue being discussed in all corners. Back and forth, it's gotten pretty heated discussions between on the community council levels between chairs and whatnot. So I don't want to take up too much more time on this topic, but lots of stuff going on the homelessness issue right now. What else do we have? Oh, the ARPA funding. That subcommittee has not, we're just barely getting up and running for that thing that Esther and I are going to be sitting on, this distribution of the federal funds for the emergency relief. It hasn't happened yet, so there's no new update on that one. I don't want to do all the talking, but it doesn't look like there's anybody here from the other subcommittees. So does anybody have any questions? All right, then We'll move on to discussion, dialogue about human rights around the world. Because we're running so late, can suggest that we skip this item on the agenda this month unless somebody has something very important to them that they need to get off their chest about human rights in, I don't know, local, national, or global. Does anybody have something? Okay, not seeing anything. I guess I can entertain a motion that we adjourn until our next meeting, which is scheduled for Tuesday, November 1st.
So
And that
moved.
would be the.
All right, we got the motion by Everett. Anybody second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Armijo. All in favor of adjourning? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned until Tuesday, November 1st, which will be our last meeting of the year, because our December meeting is going to be the Human Rights Day celebration, so we will not convene as a commission.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.